Hey students, welcome back to BBA Simplified by Dr. Vinky Sharma. In this marathon class of business law, we will begin with Unit 3, the Sales of Goods Act 1930, one of the most important and scoring chapters in business law. So the Sales of Goods Act 1930 deals with how goods are bought and sold, what makes a sale valid, how ownership transfers, and what rights sellers and buyers have. Let's begin with the meaning and purpose of this act. The Sales of Goods Act 1930 governs contract where goods are sold or agreed to be sold for a price. This means the act applies only when two conditions exist together. So the first condition is there must be goods, and the second one is there must be a sale or agreement to sell the goods. The act defines a contract of sale as a contract where the seller transfers or agrees to transfer the ownership of goods to the buyers for a price. Let's understand this with a simple example. If I buy a laptop from a shop for, let's say, rupees 40,000 rupees, that is a sale because ownership shifts immediately. But if I order a custom made laptop that will be delivered next week, then it becomes an agreement to sell. So this is the foundation on which the entire act is built. Here we see that there are two things. One is the sale and the other is agreement to sell. So these two things needs to be clear first before we move ahead. To understand the act clearly, let's look at the key features of a contract of sale. The first one we say is bilateral contract. So there must be two parties, the buyer and the seller. One person cannot sell goods to themselves. Next is transfer of property or the ownership. Ownership of goods must transfer to be or be agreed to transfer. Now remember, this is not about possession. This is about legal ownership. Next is goods must be movable. The act applies only to the movable goods like furniture, mobiles, vehicle parts, grains, etc. Any good that is immovable, for example, properties, land, building, they are not covered under Sales of Goods Contract Act. Next is price consideration must be money. Payment must be in money. If you exchange goods for goods, it is barter and not sale. Then we say that it should cover both sale and agreement to sell. So immediate transfer is nothing but the sale and the future transfer is nothing but agreement to sell. That is what we had learned in the last slide also. And finally we say that it should be governed by principles of Contract Act plus SOGA. Basic rule from the Indian Contract Act also apply. So these features differentiate a sale contract from other types of agreements. Coming on to types of goods. Now this under the Sales of Goods Act, goods are classified into three types, and that is based on when they exist. So first is the existing goods. Goods that are already in the seller's possession. For example, a ready-made shirt in a store. So this is an example of an existing good. Next is the future goods, goods that will be manufactured or acquired in the future. For example, crops that will grow after the harvest, or products that will be manufactured next week. They come under the category of future goods. Then the next one is the contingent goods. These are the goods that depend on a certain event for existence. For example, sale of fish in a pond. It is subject to catching them successfully. So wherever we say that there is a condition for the successful achievement, that comes under contingent goods. So understanding these categories is important because ownership and risk transfer the rules and it vary for each type of goods. Now coming on to the formation of the sales contract. Let's discuss that what are essentials of a contract of sale. So to form a valid contract of sale, there are certain things that we should be knowing. First is two parties, buyer and seller. So there must be a clear transfer between these two different parties. The next one is goods. Only movable goods can be sold and not any service, not any land. Then is price consideration. The exchange must be for money. If you give a phone and get a laptop in return, then that is barter and not a sale. So these essentials are similar to the features of the sales contract. Right, then is transfer of ownership. Again, the contract must involve the transfer of property in goods, not just the physical possession. All essentials of valid contract, which means that it should be free consent, it should be lawful objects and other categories that we had learned in the last unit. Then is delivery and payment condition. So both parties must agree on how and when the delivery and payment will take place. Now let's take an example to understand these features together. If you purchase a refrigerator from an electronic store for ₹25,000 with delivery promised in 3 days. So this is a contract of sale. Ownership will transfer once conditions agreed by both the parties are fulfilled. So these essentials ensure that a contract is legally enforceable. Now let's understand one of the most important concepts in the Sales of Goods Act, that is sales versus agreement to sell. Many exam questions are directly asked from this topic. We understand first what is sale and then we will talk about agreement to sell. So we say that a sale happens when ownership of the goods is transferred to the buyer immediately. For example, if I purchase a mobile phone from a shop and pay instantly, ownership shifts immediately and that is called a sale. Whereas in case of agreement to sell, we are here talking about the future sale. So ownership will be transferred later. For instance, if I book a refrigerator that will be delivered next week, it is nothing but agreement to sell. Why? Because ownership has not yet passed. Therefore, we see that the key difference is ownership, immediate in sale, and it is future in case of agreement to sell. Next one is the risk. In sale, buyer bears the risk. In an agreement, seller bears the risk. Coming on to the nature, we say that sale is executed and agreement to sell is executory. So this concept helps determine who bears loss if goods are damaged or stolen. If it is sale, then it is the buyer, and if it is agreement to sell, then it is the seller. Next, we move to the conditions and warranties. Again, one of the most tested topic in this unit. Talking about condition, we say that a condition is a very important term of the contract. If a condition is breached, the buyer can reject the goods. So if there is a breach of a condition, the contract can be repudiated. For example, if you buy a car and it has no engine, the main purpose of the contract is defeated here. So you can reject the car without any issues. Talking about warranty, we say that it is a less important term because it is a minor part of a contract. If a warranty is breached, you cannot reject the goods, you can only claim for the damages. For example, if a car's stereo is not working, so you cannot return the car itself. You can only claim a repair or a compensation for that stereo which is not working. Again, understanding this difference helps the buyer know their rights in case of defective goods. To make it even clearer, let's look at the difference between the conditions and warranty. Talking about the importance, we say that condition is fundamental to the contract and warranty is secondary or collateral to the contract. When we talk about the effect of breach, then if a condition is breached, buyer may reject the goods, and if a warranty is breached, then the buyer can only claim for damages and cannot reject the goods. Then there is another difference, that is right to treat condition as warranty. So the buyer may in some cases choose to treat a condition as a warranty to avoid cancelling the contract. Example, we had just talked, no engine in the car, that is breach of a condition, and car missing a toolkit, that is breach of a warranty. So this distinction helps in determining the buyer's remedies, what a buyer can do in each of the cases. Coming on to the next part, that is transfer of ownership. So let's understand what it is. Meaning of transfer of ownership. This is our next topic. It is also called as passing of property, right? So ownership refers to the legal title of goods, not just the physical possession. Therefore, we understand that ownership transfers when first the parties intend it, when they actually want to transfer the ownership, goods are identified or ascertained, when goods are in deliverable condition, and when condition of sales are fulfilled. So therefore, we also understand that ownership is not merely possession. Let's understand it with an example. If you buy a laptop online and pay in advance, but the product is still in seller's warehouse, so ownership may or may not have passed based on the contract terms. So understanding when ownership passed is crucial because risk transfers with the ownership. When the ownership is transferred, then only the risk will get transferred. The Sales of Goods Act lays down very clear rules for when ownership is transferred. So let's look at these rules. Rule number 1 says that there has to be specific goods in deliverable state, right? So ownership passes when the contract is made, like buying a ready-made shirt at a store. It has to be specific goods. Specific goods not in deliverable state, then what is to be done in this case? Here ownership passes only when goods are put in deliverable condition, like furniture ordered but polishing is incomplete. So ownership remains with the seller here. Then is sale of uncertain goods. What happens in case of uncertain goods? Ownership passes only after goods are identified and separated. Like when you buy 10 kg rice out of 1000 kilo of the bag. So once that 10 kg gets separated, then only the sale happens. Next is goods on approval or sale of return. Ownership passes when the buyer accepts the goods or buyer retains the goods without any rejection. For example, a dress taken home for trial is not owned by the buyer until it is approved by the buyer. So these rules help us determine who bears the risk of loss. Similarly, there is goods yet to be put in deliverable state. The product is not yet ready, will take time to get ready. It will be a good choice that whenever you answer this question in the examination, you can draw the diagrams or you can use the examples while answering the question. Now, what is passing of risk? Let's discuss this. It is again a very simple yet very important concept. The general rule of this act is that risk passes with the ownership. As simple as that, even if the possession has not been delivered. So this means that whoever owns the goods bears the risk, even if they do not have physical possession. For example, if I am buying a washing machine and the ownership passes to me, but the machine gets damaged while it was still in transport, then question comes that who bears the risk? Here, I bear the loss. Why? Because ownership had transferred from the seller. However, if it was only an agreement to sell and the ownership had not passed, then in that case the seller would have borne the loss. So the risk is always linked with the point of transfer of the property. Right? The next part of the unit is performance of contract. Let us now understand what is performance of the sales contract, which includes duties of both the seller and the buyer. A contract of sale is performed when the seller delivers the goods, the buyer accepts the goods, the buyer pays for the goods. So performance includes the correct goods, correct quantity, proper delivery method, timely payment and acceptance of goods. The deliver can be actual, symbolical or constructive here. Also, we say that when the delivery of wrong quantity happen, then also this rules apply. And also the delivery by installments. Let's understand it with an example. If you order a microwave online and the seller delivers a different model, the wrong product, then performance is not valid because wrong goods were delivered. So performance ensures that both the parties fulfill their obligations as agreed in the contract. Now another essential part of performing a contract of sale is the delivery of goods. Delivery means voluntary transfer of possession from the seller to the buyer or their authorized agents. Now there are three types of deliveries. The first one is the actual delivery, where the goods are physically handed over to the buyer. For example, you buy a mobile phone and take it home directly. So that means direct or the actual delivery has happened. Next is symbolic delivery. Here goods are not physically transferred, but something representing the good is delivered. Maybe the key or the documents. For example, handing over the key of a warehouse or document of title like a bill of loading. Right? Then the third type is the constructive delivery. Here the seller acknowledges that goods are now held on behalf of the buyer even without physical movement. For example, a courier company confirms they are now holding a parcel for the buyer. Now, understanding these types of deliveries helps us determine that when possession transfers, when is crucial for deciding rights and liabilities of both the parties. On the fifth part of this unit, we come on to rights of unpaid seller, which is again another important concept. We say that a seller is considered unpaid under the Act when the whole price has not been paid or the seller receives a bill of exchange or check but it was dishonored. This gives the unpaid seller special rights to protect themselves. For example, if a buyer takes delivery of goods but their check bounces, then the seller becomes an unpaid seller and can enforce legal remedies here. So here the law recognizes that sellers deserve strong protection because they have already parted with the goods or ownership. An unpaid seller gets three major rights against the goods themselves. First is right of lien. Here the seller can retain the possession of the goods until the payment is made. For example, a car dealer can refuse to release a car until full payment is received. So that is right to or right of lien. Next is right of stoppage in transit. If a buyer becomes insolvent, the seller can stop the goods while they are still in transit. For example, if goods are being transported by the truck and seller learns buyer is bankrupt, here the seller can instruct the transport to stop the delivery right away. The next one is right to resell. So here it means that if the buyer defaults, then the seller can resell the goods and recover his losses. Like we have generally seen that if the buyer does not pay for perishable goods like vegetables, then in that case the seller can resell it immediately. So these rights actually protect the seller's financial interest and prevent loss in case of buyer's defaults. Now, what are the rights against the buyer here? Besides rights against the goods, the unpaid seller also has legal rights against the buyer personally. This includes sue for price. If the ownership has passed to the buyer, then seller can actually sue for full payment. Next is the sue for damages. If buyer wrongfully refuses to accept the goods, then seller can claim the financial loss. The third right is sue for interest. Seller can claim interest on delayed payments if agreed in the contract or under the law. And the fourth one is sue for repudiation. That is, if buyer cancels the contract without justification, then seller can sue for the compensation. Let's understand it with an example. Let's say that if a buyer orders a machinery worth rupees 3 lakh, but then refuses to take the delivery without any reason. So in that case, the seller can sue for damages based on the market price differences. So these rights again ensure that buyer cannot escape the liability after entering into a valid contract. Let's now understand what are auction sale. Now let's move to auction sale, again a very interesting and a practical topic. To understand auction, it is said that an auction sale is a sale where goods are sold to the highest bidder, right? And this sale is further conducted by an auctioneer who acts as an agent for the seller. This auction sale is governed by section 64 of SOGA, that is Sales of Goods Act. There are some key features that we need to understand here. The first one is the bidding system. We say that sale happens through the competitive bidding. So whosoever bids highest, he wins. Next is auctioneer is an agent here. So auctioneer is the person who invites the bids, announces the winners and holds authority to complete the sale. Then is sale in lots. So goods may be divided into separate lots and each lot is a separate contract. Next we say that bid can be withdrawn before the hammer falls. So until the hammer falls, no contract is formed. Therefore a bidder can withdraw freely before the final confirmation. It is said that sale is complete on the hammer fall. So when the auctioneer's hammer fall or any announced sign is given, then only the sale becomes final. And finally, we understand that there should be reserve price or any minimum price. So if the seller may set a minimum price which is below which goods will not be sold. So to understand this reserve price, let's take an example. Let's say that if a bidder offers rupees 5,000 for a product, but the reserve price was rupees 7,000. So here the auctioneer will not finalize the sale unless the reserve price is met. These rules or features actually ensure the fairness, transparency and protection for both the seller and the buyer. Now to understand the types of auction, we say that auctions can be conducted in several ways. And the Sale of Goods Act recognizes these different types of auction sale. Understanding these is important both for exam and also for real life scenarios. So let's understand them one by one. The first one is auction with reserve price, also called as minimum bid auction, the one that we had just discussed in the last slide. Here the seller sets a minimum acceptable price. For example, the seller can set a reserve price of rupees 10,000. Any bid below that will not be accepted. The next type is auction without reserve price, where no minimum price is fixed. The highest the bid, even if low, but it must be accepted. Next is auction by knockout system or knocking it down. Here bidders agree among themselves to keep the prices low, and one bidder buys at low price, and then they share the profits privately. And this is considered as unfair practice. The next one is the Dutch auction. Here the auctioneer starts at a high price and decreases until a bidder accepts. It is the most commonly used method in the flower market and in the perishable goods, this Dutch auction method. Next is the private treaty. Here the auctioneer negotiates privately with the buyers instead of getting into open bidding. So these types helps us determine the rules, responsibilities as well as protection available to the buyer and the seller. Now let's understand the rules governing auction sales as laid down in section 64 of the Sale of Goods Act. The first rule is bid withdrawal allowed before hammer falls, or completion of sale at hammer fall only. We understand that a sale is completed when the auctioneer's hammer falls. Until that moment, the bidder can withdraw the bid freely. Next is reserved price. We have already understood it twice. So seller may fix a minimum price. If bid do not reach the reserve price, the auctioneer may withdraw the goods. Then is pretended bidding or sale voidable. If a seller uses fake bidders to increase the price artificially, so here the sale becomes voidable at the option of the buyer. Then is sale in lots. Again, we had already talked about it. Each lot in an auction is treated as a separate sale with separate ownership transfer. Then is right to bid. Unless prohibited, a seller can reserve the right to bid, but this must be clearly declared beforehand. Ownership passes at the hammer fall. We know that the bid is only confirmed with the fall of a hammer. And finally, auctioneer entitled to charges. This is also something which is decided beforehand. Let's take an example again. If a bidder withdraws before the hammer falls, so we say that there is no contract. If the auctioneer accepts a bid after the hammer fall, that acceptance is invalid. So these rules ensure the fairness and transparency in the auction transactions. Having understood all this, let's take a quick review of whatever we have learned in this unit. We had covered the meaning and features of contract of the sale. Then we discussed that what are the difference between conditions and warranties. What is the meaning of transfer of property? What is performance of contract? What are the rights of unpaid seller? And finally, we have learned that what is auction sale rule. Coming on to this last slide where we always discuss that what are the important past year questions. Define contract of sale, distinguish sale and agreement to sell. A very common question which has come almost in every year. What is condition? How does it differ from warranty? Explain rules for transfer of ownership. Discuss the rights of unpaid seller and write a note on auction sale. Thank you so much for learning with BBA Simplified by Dr. Vinky Sharma. In the next video, we will be covering Unit 4, Limited Liability Partnership. Do like, share and subscribe for more marathon classes. Thank you so much.